there. Today we are going to talk about the different, the origins and the functions of clothing, uh, along with the evolution in the Indian uh, sector, Indian context. Starting with why do we need to study the theories and functions? Firstly, we will do this to recognize the motivations and the desires of individuals as well as the institutions, so that we can get in certain type of dresses, design and constructed. Secondly, we also try to identify the specific nature or functions that the wearer would require. And finally, to design and construct clothes in such a creative way so that a maximum satisfaction level of the wearer is achieved. Coming to the origin of the clothing, it is said that it might have been inferred from the archaeological finding of ancient paintings and uh, figurines. The dating of the origin of the clothing might keep on changing with new findings, but what we understand is that uh, you know, uh, clothing might have originated from about one 170,000 to 540,000 years ago. One of the view is that the origin of clothing might have coincided with the northward migration of the Homo sapiens away from the warm climates of Africa. Another view is that the invention of clothing may have been necessitated by the loss of the body hair during the process of evolution. The severe clothes of the northern regions might have forced them to cover themselves with objects available around the surroundings. It also suggests that the early form of clothing might have been made of animal hide and fur, as well as vegetation, including bark, leaves, grass, that were draped and wrapped around and tied around the body. Archaeological findings of dyed and twisted flax fibers are also found um, from 34,000 BC, the Republic of Georgia. Sewing needles are found from 30,000 BC of bone and ivory, which also suggests that clothing might have originated very early in the human history. If we try to understand the milestones in the history of clothing, we start with the fiber and thread. So the process of pressing and compacting fibers together were used to make the first textile called felt. Bark clothing was the primitive fabric made by beating and matting soft inner bark of certain trees. Twisting and dyed flax fibers may have been found in the prehistoric caves of Georgia. Now, all these things may have been originated anything around the Paleolithic age of 30,000 BC to 100,000 BC, the Mesolithic age of 10,000 to 4,000 BC. The thread and the cord was made out of grass, animal sinews were also used to bind and fastening the tools. Coming to the sewing part, the sewing needle, as we said, discussed in the slide before, that it was made out of bone and ivory or ivory. It was discovered in the caves of Russia, which dates back to 30,000 BC. These needles were possibly used to stitch vegetation on pieces of leather so that clothes can be made to protect humans from extreme cold. Come to the woven fabric, spinning and weaving was developed during the Neolithic period, which is around 10,000 to 4,500 BC. Uh, this was made with vegetable bast fibers, glass, cotton, silk, as well as wool. The early findings of woven woolen cloth is dated back to 6500 BC. Silk also flourished during the Neolithic China and Japan. The earliest evidence of silk production in China dates back to something around 5000 BC to 3000 BC. Coming to the sewing machine, the earliest sewing machine was invented in 1719 by Thomas Saint. However, it was Isaac Merritt single who won the technology race in 1851 with a patented sewing machine. And finally, the power loom, the mechanized power loom that partially automated the textile uh, weaving is one of the most important invention of the industrial, um, revolution. It was designed by Edmund Cartwright in 1784, and it was built and patented the next year. By 1850, England had over 260,000 power looms that were in operations throughout the country. Now, when we come to the theories of the origin of clothing, there are multiple theories that says that why origins might have originated or why it was being used. The first of which, these are the four theories that are there. The first of which is called the modesty theory. Now, modesty es- essentially refers to dressing or behaving in a way so as to avoid impropriety or indecency. Uh, the idea is to avoid attracting any sort of uh, sexual attraction. Uh, so, as a function of dress, modesty is concerned with concealing oneself and the body. All people who follow modesty theory propose that morality is dependent on modesty. The attribute of demureness determines how people should dress. However, the modesty theory has always been refuted by other theorists with different viewpoints. Some suggest that modesty arises out of self-consciousness regarding one's imperfect body and defend against the negative body image. The social norm also, argues that modesty does not arise from shame but from the need of self-propriety or the privacy, and the socio-cultural environment as well as the norms of strictness or permissiveness in society influence the codes of decency. Uh, Others also say that modesty is not just instinctive and it's learned or imposed by our cultural upbringing. The concept depends on variables such as religion, culture, age, place, etc. Uh, this point is to the fact that modesty have different connotations in different cultures. Questions may arise that how much skin can be revealed or concealed. Forms focus on the studies of media and the celebrity culture. Uh, the concept of modesty have not, however, been stagnant except for the consistent norm that it is rooted in religious faith. What is considered modest in one community may not necessarily correlate to modesty in others. From the fashion perspective, modesty theory has two distinct expressions. First is the social, cultural, political, religious norms of clothing in some countries that have played role in defining modesty. In some civilization, the veiling of faces indicated status. Women of class were required to wear veils, while others, they were not allowed to do so. Uh, it is also, you know, the other expression of modesty is that women's clothing in public life, including workplace. In Victorian era, the length of dresses of skirts were, that prescribed for women and children. Women and girls of 16 years and above were required to wear skirts where hemlines reached below the ankles. However, during World War II, rationing of clothes were imposed, and for example, skirts of you know women's utility suits were standardized to the knee length. Coming to the immodesty theory, so the history of civilization shows that both modest and immodest clothes have coexisted. Immodesty theory recognizes the basic instinct of human beings is to arouse some interest in the opposite sex and proposes that clothing is worn for this purpose. This behavior may have been learned by watching colorful displays of plumage from some species of birds which are used for attracting mates. Modesty theory says that the impact of trying to attract attention of the participant can be maximized by adopting clever combination of hiding and revealing tactics through provocative clothing. Now, some of the major factors for the differences in perception about immodesty also include certain things. Firstly, is the situational factors, which means attitudes toward immodest clothing has been historically conditioned by societal norms, individuals' personal disposition towards sexuality, second towards religious faiths. Thirdly, there's psychological factors because psychological intention towards pleasing oneself or pleasing others has an impact of the wearing of immodest clothes. Uh, Physiological factors like differences in anatomical proportions, even among people wearing the same kind of clothes, also play a role in reflecting immodesty. The physical and the psychological comfort factor is also there, where people are comfortable. Some people are comfortable in wearing certain kind of clothes, others are essentially not. Third one is called the adornment theory. So the adornment theory says that the human beings began to adorn themselves even before they started wearing clothes, as what we know clothing now. The desire for adornment is considered to be natural and instinctive, which is motivated by the desire to feel good about oneself and to appear attractive to others. The aesthetic value of beauty is enhanced by other embedded qualities such as amiability. Uh, so it is essentially a positive emotional reaction. The atomic theory also reflects the holistic approach of fashion, that its scope is beyond just clothing and it also, encompasses of accessories and cosmetics and makeup and hairstyle, enhancing beauty and makes use of all elements and principles to enhance the aesthetic appearance. Um, so the theory emphasizes that adornment also draw inspiration from nature and emulates it. Design involves colors, textures, the use of various materials for adornment. Fashion designer also incorporate, traditions and modernity for fabric development and processing and garment production. Different embellishment techniques are also used, like drying, printing, embroidery, beadwork, lacework. Uh, Adornment theory is something that is just not talking about clothing, but also other things, just not accessories and all. We are also talking about body modification, like in Chinese food binding, for artificially creating this tiny lotus feet, or wearing large circular plates by the women of Sudan. Uh, there can also be something which we understand as tattooing today. It is a body tattooing used by different tribes with distinct, have distinct identification marks to understand the rank that is held by the person within the tribe. Body painting, for example, royal Chinese, royal ladies of the Chinese dynasty, as well as Japanese geishas applied a lot of face makeup so that they can highlight you know s- the specifics of the faces and everything. And finally is the protection theory. So protection theory is very, it's the closest related to the origin of clothing, which says that because the women were human beings started in the warmer climate zones of Africa, and they didn't much need much protection against the climate. But as they moved away from Africa and migrated to the northern hemisphere, they needed to cover their bodies, particularly protect themselves from the freezing temperatures. Um, so people who lived in the colder climates used materials from the surroundings, uh, to, you know, protect themselves from cold, heat, rain, as well as the insects or the snake bites. So the raw materials that we see essentially are remnants of fur and skin of the hunted animals, as well as vegetation that they learn to process from the bark, cloth, or even fibers from rain or the rivers. Clothing has also served as a camouflage during warfares, which essentially is, it is something which is effective body covering and like armors which can help in fending off enemy attacks and swords attacks by swords or spear. Now, there is something we call as Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. Now, what is this? It is a paper called a theory of human motivation, which was presented in 1943. Abraham Maslow said that there are certain factors behind human motivation and their hierarchical relationship between these factors. It explains human behavior by showing how humans deal with more basic needs before moving to the next set of needs. It also is relevant to understand the function of clothing, which is to address multiple human needs. So, in this image, if you look at it, we start from the very base of the pyramid. There are total of five human needs. Start from the base. At the base writes the physiological needs. Now, these are a prerequisite to human survival. Clothing protects from natural climatic conditions such as freezing cold, extreme heat, a lot of rain. Then we have the safety needs. Clothing and associated accessories also help them overcome dangers from enemies as well as other living organisms that might pose a threat. Uh, there are also protective clothing and accessories that safeguard human life from wars, toxic chemicals, uh, or nuclear radiations. Then there are social needs, this third level, and it is not based on basic needs but instead on a more psychological or emotional needs. This is referred to the love and belonging stage, which includes the need of interpersonal relationships and social connections, such as friendship, love, uh, social connectivity, group affiliations. So, when consumers trust and follow fashion trends by purchasing, wearing clothes and accessories similar to worn by friends or even strangers. Then we have the esteem needs. The esteem needs uh, has two basic categories. The first one is the self-esteem, which is in terms of dignity and achievement, and the second one is the desire for respect from others in terms of status and prestige. So, a bride and bridegroom feel special by the focus of attention in their wedding ensembles. A graduating student feels a sense of achievement in the contemplating ground and gap. Then we have the final one is the self-actualization needs. This is when individual experiences self-fulfillment within themselves, so that they have attained personal growth, which can be expressed in many ways, which includes clothing. So it is in sync with individual self-image and the consumption preferences regarding their everyday clothing. Now, uh, when we talk about clothing, there are a number of functions also that is there. The first one is the protection and the comfort function. So we have to understand something that the survival has been the prime motivation of any human life, and in Maslow's hierarchy, the physiological and the safety concerns are primary and therefore is placed at the base of the pyramid. And clothing is among them. So firstly is the protection from weather hazards, like extremes of weather, so people can wear warm clothing in layers so that in sub-zero temperatures they can also keep their body heat intact. Specialized clothing such as raincoats and accessories and hats and umbrellas also protect people from the rain. The second one is the protection from environmental danger. Now, there is of course a link between the man and the environment when people need custom-made clothing to become victims to any environmental danger like insect bites or shoes that protects from dirt. It's comfort from walking on the rough surface. We also see astronauts wear very high technology spacesuits to survive in the difficult atmospheric conditions. Surgeon also wear surgical masks. The next one is the protection from occupational hazards. So threats to human life and health that can be from man-made products and machineries and systems also there. So advancement in technology has taken place so that clothing industry can use fabrics and materials that are resistant to stains, contamination, corrosion from acids, fires, electric current. We also have masks that have made with advanced material to rescue workers to help rescue workers do their job in a very highly toxic environment. We have hard hats, steel-toed shoes, safety goggles, and different sorts of safety gears which are part of the personal protective equipment we can we call it PPE. Then we have the protection from enemies. Uh, Traditionally, legendary soldiers wore armors, helmets, and carried shields. Uh, but and initially these were made out of leather and plant fiber. But as swords and spears became stronger, shoulders also need sturdier protection. So metallic armors of iron, brass, copper became dominant. Then there was gunpowders and use of projectiles was there. So now we have bulletproof vest, hazmat suits, um, camouflage clothing also is there to reduce visibility. The next one is about identity function. Now, identity is not only about the distinct nature of the dress, but also about the intention with which it is worn. So, various civilizations have also developed dress codes to distinguish among different social, economic strata of the society and professions. There are distinct cultural traditions in our society. Traditional dress express the wearer's pride in their heritage. There are norms of clothing for bride and groom in each ceremony at weddings. There are norms of austere clothing for funerals also. The differences in dressing in religious and community events exist. Clothing practices addresses and satisfies the psychological need for a common feeling of identity and belonging in a community. So we can also have that there are also accessories or tattoo that is symbolic for the common bond that is there. Clothing has traditionally expressed for evolution of gender in terms of feminine and masculine appearances. Deviation of individual from larger social groups also is used for this function. Uniforms also play a very important role in creating the new identity. A soldier often gains a new identity by joining a regiment when they wear this regimental, uniforms. So it also creates a very reinforces a very strong and new bond of cooperation among the members. There's also a psychological feeling of pride and belonging among in places where like armed forces. It's a mark of privilege. So the uniform of a personnel in a crowded place signifies that they are a source of help. A hospital where uniforms and lab coats also help to identify a doctor or nurse in case there's a medical emergency. Uh, we also have flight attendants, referee games. Just hold on for a moment. So in schools also we have identity of students established with colors, design, the way they dress. Ceremonial garments are worn on special occasion like convocation gowns or caps. Sports person also represent their country in international sports and take very important pride in wearing their country's uniform. We have the status and prestige function. So historically, clothes played a major role in the as a symbol of person's status, and so kings and queens were most extra elaborately and extravagantly dressed. There were also degrees in several kingdoms that reserved certain type of dress only for a designated few and forbade all others from wearing such clothes, creating a status quo. In ancient Rome, only senators were allowed to wear garments that were dyed with certain color of purple. Imperial China had only emperors wearing yellow robes. Uh, in earlier society, people adorn themselves with fur, hide, nails, or the thorns of their prey, so that they can proclaim that the hunting prowess and to the others, and so they can assert their prestige within their community. Now, the rapid adoption of this democratic form of governance in the recent times, they also have this guarantee to of the equality of rights and abolished all forms of dress codes for the most common people. Uh, Now, mandatory dress codes with clear differentiation of status are seen only in uniforms in the armed forces, services, uh, which has stripes on military sleeves or merit patches. These are very specific to dress codes. And finally, we have also have the ornament and the aesthetic function. So this is where the adornment theory explains that the human inclination towards beauty, aesthetics derives from the experience of viewing any anesthetic objects. The psychological association between poverty and lack of elegance results in ignoring those whose sense of dressing may not appeal to urban aesthetic sensibilities. So firstly there is design, which is the fundamental activity of designers to create new and innovative products, including apparels. Good design balances the elements and principles of design and complements the wearer's body. Then we have service ornamentation. It gives value addition to the fabrics through weaving, handcrafted techniques such as embroidery, dyeing, and printing. So this also helps in enhancing the aesthetic appeal of the clothing. Accessories are also coordinated to complement the aesthetics um, and the appeal of the clothing and complete the look with direct attention towards the wearer. Jewelry, wristwatches, shoes, bags, makeup, uniforms are also designed with two versions, which one is worn on a daily basis and the other for ceremonial occasions. Coming to the sociability and the conformity function, so people generally have a need for love and belonging as they also fear isolation. So clothes can indirectly generate identification within a group or community through the performance of the sociability and attraction. Indigenous clothing is there, uh, so it is traditionally clothing that uh, encompass a feeling of belonging uh, to a community. So it also helps in showing the one's cultural identity. We have conformity dressing where people express their loyalty to the community by adhering to the unwritten yet something which is considered dress codes. We have uniforms, which is regimented dressing. Then we have special occasion clothing like a convocation gown or a wedding dress. We have something called self-expression and actualization function. So this is in the hierarchy of human needs of Maslow. It is at the top of the pyramid. So it represents the growth of an individual towards self-growth, gaining knowledge and seeking deeper meaning of life. While the physiological and safety, social, and esteem functions addresses the basic motives, self-actualization moves a little higher, and it is used to develop an integrated personal identity. So those who seek self-actualization tend to use their dressing in a way to express their individuality and to communicate their core message. So firstly, there is acceptance of self, others, and nature. So it translates into wearing comfortable clothing without making an attempt to conceal the flaws of the body or body shaming others. Then there is reliance on own experience and judgment. So one's clothing choices can be made without the influence of others. The spontaneous and natural, which is true to one's nature, entails making the choice. Then it is task centered. So the higher mission is that is beyond the self, and the clothing style would be in sync with the mission. And there is autonomy, where there is freedom from the resilience or the external authority of the people. And it implies that you can buy clothes with your own resources and focus on earning the resources. There is continued renewal of appreciation. So there is the need for self-esteem, self-respect, positive feeling. There is a profound interpersonal relationship like self-esteem, self-respect, positive feeling derived from admiration. Then we have socially compassionate, which means sensitivity and empathy for wider society, and it is expressed through clothes and that are responsibly made for the concern of the society without any environmental degradation. Coming to the overview of the costumes, the traditional costumes of India, or how it evolved over ages in India. So we start with the prehistoric period. So in Bhopal and close to Bhopal, in Madhya Pradesh, in 1957, the archaeological excavations of the Rebecca rock shelters covered the cave paintings of very importance, and so on an early historic period of 30,000 years ago. The drawings mainly about combat, hunting, general lifestyle activities um, where you can see this people are on the horse doing some sort of hunting. And we have the Indus Valley Civilization. Uh, so it dates back to 2300 to 1700 BC. So the excavation of the Harappa and Mohenjo-daro has revealed advanced and evolved civilization. Uh, it essentially, when we look at the excavated artifacts that includes utensils, terracotta toys, potteries, um, we see certain engravings of human and animal figures which offer a view to how the society lived. Uh, so there are few very important figurines that are there. The first one is the priest king, He's wearing a shawl that is draped from under right arm and thrown over the left shoulder. The shawl is decorated with a trefoil, like a three-lobed leaf, and a double circle, single circle motifs that were originally filled with red pigments. He is also wearing a headband tied at the back with a bow, with a circular inlay ornament on the forehead, uh, a similar ornament on the upper arm. The hair is also combed and the upper lip is shaved and the beard is neatly trimmed and combed. You also get something called a dancing girl. It's a figurine of dancing girl in bronze sculpture, which is about 10.5 centimeters tall. It is depicting a young woman with stylized proportions, with one arm on her hip. She's wearing several bangles on her upper arm, wrist, as well as necklace. It is said to be made with lost wax. Uh, it also There are also evidences that are coming from seals, uh, one of which depicts a deity. You can see with the horned headdress and bangles on both the arms, standing near the people tree. There's a giant ram and seven figurines in procession to complete the narrative. Figures are ceremonially dressed long with single plumed headdresses and bangles on both arms. Coming to the Vedic period and the post-Vedic period, the Vedic period refers to the historical period between the end of the Indus Valley Civilization and the second round of urbanization that rose around the Indo-Gangetic Plains around 600 BC. So the historians trace early Vedic from 1200 to 1900 BC and the late Vedic from 1900 to 600 BC. So these fair-skinned invaders were known as Aryans, subjugated the native plain. Over time, they settled, um, down, leading to assimilation of their literature, religions, modes. Uh, so the Vedic period is associated mostly with the spread of Aryans, uh, and essentially, the later Vedic period is associated with the emergence of a hierarchy of social classes based on the divisions of labors, that is the Brahmins, and which were the gurus, knowledge-created teachers, Kshatriyas, and the warriors and rulers, Vaishyas, the merchants, tradesmen, and Shudras were the laborers and service providers. Uh, this led to the birth of the social order known as the caste system. The post-Vedic, however, is the costume comes from the literary text and from wood, ivory, and metal sculptures. The predominant style was draped clothing, and some of the examples were cut and sew garments. So, for the draped costume, uh, the literature refers to the costume style comprised of unstitched garments draped and wrapped around the body. The lower garments were called Antarya, the upper garments were called Uttarya. When one end of Antarya was tied uh, at the waist and taken between the legs to form a drape of bifurcated garment, it was called Kacha style. Um Textiles was also referred around this time in the libraries. This signifies that Indian cotton from wool-bearing trees of India. Rigveda is also mentioning night and dawn as two female weavers, extensive trade with near and distant countries. The sea route was evidence of the mention of fine cotton, linen, wool, and silk produced in Benares and Bihar. There are references of woolen shawl called "dusa" that is available even today in Punjab. Um, Another variety of wool fabric is called bahita. There's also mentions of dyes, accessories. and jewelry. Uh, so a knowledge of natural dyes were there, like indigo, crimson, haldi, magenta, and black. Accessories. People would wear leather shoes dyed in yellow, red, and black with thick soles. Ornaments were an integral part of dressing, and ceremonies, precious materials such as gold, silver, bronze, ivory, mother of pearl was used. The earliest form of religious worship came to be known as Hinduism, and the Brahmin sadhu or sannyasin wore a wrap skirt tied around the waist with a cord uh, and an underwear. Men and women draped short cloak around their left shoulder, leaving the right shoulder and arm bare. Garments were made out of tree bark, found even today among the Kolkata of Orissa. Aesthetic covers their bodies with skins of goat and deer. Cap of headdress, sometimes worn by both the sexes, growing a beard, and hair was permitted. Hair was plaited and twisted in knots on the head. Coming to the Maurya and the Sunga period, men and women continued to wear unstitched garments at this point. Uttariya, Antariya, Kayaband, as in Vedic period. How the manner of draping and the fabric varied according to the status and the profession. Uttariya, the men's Uttariya was draped in different ways. Upper classes and the courtiers draped Uttariya made out of fine cotton, muslin, or silk on one or both shoulders or diagonally across the torso under the right arm, thrown over the left shoulder. Um, on the other hand, farmer laborers often worn their uttariya on coarser fabric around the head for protection from the hot sun or to wipe the sweat. Antariya, the unstitched antariya, was worn by um, Beldi, was of white cotton, linen, muslin, which was often embroidered in golden yarn or gold yarn and encrusted with precious stones. Men wrapped it around the waist, fastening the free end between the legs in a kacha style, the length varying from calf to the ankle length for the elite and shorter for commoners. The lower caste wore unbleached coarse varieties of cotton antariya, and the antariya was fastened at the center front of the waist with a sash called the kayaband. The simple kayaband was a Vedaka broad-ended version of uh, basic belt. The embroidered style was also there. The next part would be the Gupta period, where there are uh, costumes which depicts the cushion clothing. The men's costume comprised of stitched garments that had now taken precedence over draped garments, which uh, for both northern and the southern India. Um, the adoption of stitched garments elevated the status and the styles previously worn by attendant soldiers, foreigners, to its elevated association with the royalty. The Guptas adopted a cut-and-sewn trouser and boots, coat trouser and boots, which were preferred in cold climates of the North India, along with the indigenous Antariya, Uttariya, and the Kayaband preferred in the south of the country. Uh, the ensemble consists of a calf-length tunic, skull cap worn with tapering trousers, which was also common in the Gupta court. A tunic, a brocade tunic, was worn by the ministers, probably that evolved from the earlier Thailand garment at the center, front at the center, crossover opening called a kanchuka. The King's costume generally comprised of a striped silk tunic with outreya, both on woven borders. The elaborate kayaband became a plain cord or belt buckled in different ways. Antariya was draped in a different way, knotted on the hip, draped casually on the shoulder. The distinctive accessories were the crown, precious metals, turban, became outdated and became associated with ministers and officials. Uh, the varieties of women's costumes was much more. The short and long antariya was tied under the navel but could be draped in different ways. They were worn in a kacha style and could be worn in also lehenga style. By tucking it in the right hip, wrapping it around the hip and tucked at the left hip, so that to emphasize the hip curve. Another style with the short mid-thigh length uh, by combining kacha and lehenga styles. There's also a breast band that is designed to support and hold up the breast rather than covering them and supplemented a decorative necklace. Uh, an indigenous garment that is the choli was made from simple square piece of fabric with slit at the neck. Coming to the southern kingdoms, one of the very important kingdom was the Vijayanagar Empire. So in the Vijayanagar Empire, while some women did not wear blouses, others wear a very popular fitted blouses called the Kanchaka or the Kanchaka Choli. This was sewn by tailors. Uh, there are poets writing about a tight upper garment that is worn with shawl. For men's clothing, Proxurus men wore something called a pullavi or a tall turban, as you see in the image, made out of silk with gold decoratives. There's also jewelry, which is in a very stark contrast with the frugal life of the common people. Um, so the royalty would wear lavish clothes and wore jewelry. As we move forward, uh, there are influences of the British in the Indian fashion, and so here we have the Marathas, and so so they came very close to the imperial pretensions that from starting from scratch, the non-Brahmin caste of Maharashtra region had been organized in fighting forces, and so this is one of the images which gives a very subtle reference to that. Now, India is one of the countries that has been invaded multiple times and has been followed by periods of foreign rule. So this has essentially led to a very cross fertilization of ideologies and cultures. So one of the examples is that under Mughals, uh, the inhabitants were known as the Turks, and Emperor Akbar patronized the Persian style, bringing Persian master artisans to India where they established their courts. Uh, an example of synthesis of the modern version of Chatar Jama is also introduced during the Mughal court by Akbar, Emperor Akbar, and this was succeeded by the advent of the Portuguese and the colonized British for the 300 years till the independence in 1947. Now, Indian textiles and clothing in the first of the 20th century essentially meant that a lot of you know cultural amalgamation and appropriation of diversification was happening without elimination of formally established indigenous elements. Now, the intermingling of Indian and Greek style during the ancient history is seen in the Indian art and sculptures even today. Elements from the union of Indian and Middle Eastern styles are now something which is considered very Indian. Uh, Here we see a roller printed textile. It was printed in England in the early 19th century. However, if you look at it, the designs are exceptionally Indian. And now, the initially wearing Western clothes, though, were restricted in the elite and the courts, gradually by the late 19th and early 20th century. For those who had received the Western education, also started wearing Western style clothing. So, as wives of Indian babus who worked in the British offices accompanied their husbands to official get-togethers, they adopted sari blouses with band collars, long puff sleeves that resembled the Western blouses worn by British Memsahibs. Uh, the sari petticoats resembled Western full-length skirt with tucks, lace at the hem. Sari edges could be trimmed with a lace. In the early 20th century, the Parsi community migrated from Persia to settle in Gujarat and other parts of the western India. The sea trade with China also provided a way for the Parsi men to bring back embroidered fabric from China for women in the family. This became an inspiration for women to embroider intricate patterns along the edges of chiffon or satin saris. Uh, the embroidery became, in zari and with metal work was popularly called the Parsi Karhai. Uh, Coming to the royal families of India, uh, so though decreasing patronage and famines in some parts of India led to the decline in artisan sector. At the same time, the elite dressed in both traditional and Western styles. A landmark occasion was the Delhi Darbar in 1911, and during this occasion, Indian royalty put up display of wealth and satirical refinement through meticulously crafted Indian clothing. Uh, there was simultaneously the preference of Indian attire in court with visible European influences. So here we have Maharaja, Savai Man Singh and Maharani Gayatri Devi of Jaipur. And here we have Maharani Indira Devi of Kuch Bihar. So they popularized the elegant chiffon sari. Other royal ladies were also seen wearing silk characteristic saris of their home state. It can be Banarasi or Maheshwar or Kanjivaram or even handcrafted bandhani. Here we have Maharani Samyukta Bai Sahib Holkar and Maharaja Shri Yashwantrao Holkar of Indore. They are wearing very international attires, and so they were even clients of luxury jewelry brands like Cartier. Here we have Maharaja Yadavendra Singh of Patiala sporting this Patiala jewels made by Cartier. Cartier currently owns this necklace. A replica of this was recently worn by Brigitte Dosanjh in one of the Met Galas. Now, coming to the clothing for the Indian populace, so a significant development that happened was the you know emancipation of the women in India. So it involved sati regulation, banning the practice of sati, uh, the practice of veiling of women, which were thus started to diminish. Progressive thinkers encouraged women to receive education. The first of the 1900 also gained, political significance, struggle for freedom. Mahatma Gandhi realized that clothing is not merely a body covering but representation of identity or of an individual or even a nation. So he urged people to boycott British made textiles and clothing, propagating the use of khadi. Khadi was the hand spun and hand woven on small looms, and it was a fabric that he developed at home. Now, today, khadi is something that has become more popular over decades, and by post-independence India, and more so in the late 20th century, khadi has taken a very extended role. It is now looked as an indigenous legacy, a heritage, and source of livelihood for the Indian community and masses, and it's very significant as it's an environmental friendly fabric. The MSME, the Ministry of Small and Medium Enterprises, and NGOs, designers, patrons have proactively promoting khadi and versatile fabrics. It is an khadi ensemble that was made by Cell DGCN in the Lakme Fashion Week, summer of 2017. Coming to the Indian cinemas and fashion. So from 1950s, the Indian cinema became the fulcrum of styles and clothing and accessories and styling and appearance. Newspapers, magazines, and cinema posters became the key sources of people to view costumes in their semi-idols. Direction and processes was such that to diffuse in fashion trends from celebrity star to the ramp stroke, rack points to the influence of cinema on fashion for the masses. Coming to the 1950s fashion, the style was overtly referenced that of the Hollywood stars and occasionally the street fashion and the fashion capitals, notably London. Shami Kapoor was seen to wear sporty jackets, tapered leg trousers that was very similar to the teddy boy subcultures of the 1950s of London and later the mod subculture of London. The transmission of fashion updates from the West were interpreted to suit Indian aesthetics. So, taking a cue from the narrow waist, slender silhouettes of the 1950s, the heroines of the Hindi cinema, like Vajanti Mala, Wahida Rahman, also wear sari blouses and kurtas that was dresses were similar to the body's pattern, slimmed down the torso, and had a looser silhouette. Hairstyles for men was distinctive, flamboyant yet very masculine style for the Hindi superstar. Again, Shami Kapoor had that at the blend of Teddybear subculture of the 1950s and the singer Elvis Presley. The hairstyle for actresses were less ornate, more natural than those of the 1940s. The popular hair flick on the forehead of Nargis, Meena Kumari, and Madhubala. Coming to the 1960s, the fitted 1950s silhouette of the Hollywood pioneered by iconic actors like Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe, uh, was gradually adopted from the next decade and resonates with the similarity of design and form. The typical style gained popularity, like Sadhna, Asha Parekh, and Shimla Tagore. The hourglass silhouette of clinched waist, uh, tightly around which drew attention. The bust was accentuated with reinforced cups, which would directly be attached to the garments, resembling a conventional techniques of tulip house construction. Hip curve was emphasized while the inner girdle, which was assured to have a perfect and a stable shape. The 1960 hairstyle echoed the buffet popularized by Hollywood. It had several variations, and the common one was the hump up mount of hair resembling the beehive of the top of the back of the head, and the rest of the hair falling at the sides or at the back. The bouffant was often accompanied by a short fringe. The characteristic styles were also integrated with the on-screen persona of stars that a strong association developed with the name of the icon. One such example is the forehead fringe of other restyling, and it was sported by Sadhna. The style became so popular that it referred to as Sadhna cut. Uh, Another existing version of the indigenous jacket of men, two versions. One was a single-breasted mid-hip length jacket without lapels but more structured band collar, full sleeves. The This was referred to as the Bandhkala jacket, Bandhkala coat. Uh, the other version was the same style details but sleeveless and global recognition attributed India's first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru's style within the iconic weave by pinning a red rose every day. Jacket became so characteristic to his style that it became to known as the Nehru jacket. The fashion media of the West took note of the Nehru jacket, and it appeared in the Times magazine as number 7 of the top 10 list of political fashion statements. The Nehru jacket is said to be the descendant of the northern Indian achkan and close-necked coat-like garment used to consider as a coat dress for Indian nobility. Nehru also dressed in a knee-length single-breasted structured jacket with sleeves and buttons. It was as the sherwani as we know it. So it was first adopted by the Nawabs and the Nizams and became a popular choice. The modifications in the length made it versatile and adaptable to the Western taste. So here we have the structured Bandhla jacket. It continued to be popular because of the aesthetics and versatility. So the Beatles, in, you can see wearing the Bandhla jacket, or still from Doctor Number of the 1970 62 movie, we see Sean Connery as James Bond wearing a Bandhla jacket. 1970s, we see the increased use of synthetic fabrics in India, um, as it was a similar trend across the world. Uh, this was because these fabrics were cheaper, easier to maintain than natural fabrics. The Beatles visited ashram of the Mahesh Yogi in Rishikesh at this point. India was preferred as a go-to destination for foreign tourists, celebrities, and those on a spiritual quest. The Woodstock Festival of Peace and Music and the flower showering movement of the 1960s, carried over to the 1970s, but with a more modern and refined look. So, globally, ethnic clothes of India style prints, flowing light gauze dresses, handcrafted elements like tie and dye, batik, knitwear, crochet, macrame, ripped bell-bottom jeans coordinated with twin sets of knits, flowing kaftans, black prints, disco printed, shiny lyrics clothing were very popular in India. Overwhelming popularity of short-fitted Indian kurta, teamed with bell-bottom pants, particular and similar of Western silhouette, high platform shoes were worn. A notable development was the move towards the equality of sexes. Women had a greater freedom of choices in terms of length of skirts, jeans, a continuation of bell-bottom, wide-leg trousers combining the upper and lower garments, jumpsuits. Uh, so at this point, Yves Laure also introduced the safari jacket in the 1967 runway show as one of their designs. So this was the representation of safari suit in the Indian form. The 1980s, MTV had the access on Indian television, and it was so powerful that two visual identities was expressed. There was also the power dressing, the power look, the shoulder pads, the curves. Both men and women were wearing the waistlines very high. Men were also wearing oversized blazers, pronounced shoulder pads, silhouettes. By the 90s, we see a lot of unisex ready-to-wear fashion, a lot of grunge look, the leather man jacket, white sneakers we see in the movies like Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. There are few garments which became very um, famous with the Indian movies is the collared kurta and the sheer salwar of Bunty and Bubbly, uh, the t-shirt with the patiala salwar of the V-neck. Uh, there was this Bajirao Mastani costume and the Anju Modi collection of 2015, which was extremely inspired by the Bajirao collection. And the costume of Padmavat and how Wimple and Harpreet Narula got inspired by that. We also see the saris of Amatri Harpon and Devdas, tuning the purple saris becoming extremely popular. Now, there are certain designers who have made very strong impact in fashion over years. So these are few. There are much more. Ritukumar Rohitbal, Ritukumar known for her signature look on traditional Indian styles. Rohitbal for his usage of Indian ethnic wears. Anita Dongre using Indian handicrafts and handloom fabrics. Manish Malhotra is the favorite designer of Bollywood, wherein uh, uses a lot of pastel colors, chiffons. Tarun Tahlani, again, very famous for their bridal wears. Nita Abdullah, also a very, along with Sabyasachi, all three of them are very famous for their bridal wears. Manish Arora, on the other hand, does a lot of eccentric work, very plum point, very eccentric work in their way. So with this, we end this session. Are there any questions? Can answer. Otherwise, we conclude the session. Okay. Thank you then.